Rudy Giuliani has gone from being known as America's mayor following the terror attacks on September 11th to a conspiracy theory-loving ally of former President Trump, heavily involved in the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Joining us now, writer Andrew Kurtzman. He's the author of the new book out tomorrow entitled Giuliani, The Rise and Tragic Fall of America's Mayor. And this is a question that many have been asking. You answer in the book, what happened to Rudy Giuliani? Or was he always, what's the word that I can use carefully, conflicted?
He's a very complex figure, and I had the same question, and that's why I wrote the book. So what happened to Giuliani? The Giuliani story is one of the great rise and fall stories of our time. I mean, he was the most famous prosecutor of the 1980s, arguably the most famous mayor of the 1990s. After 9/11, he was more beloved than the Pope, according to the polling. And I think the short answer to what happened is desperation. It was desperation for power, desperation for money, and then when it all came crashing down, when he had a humiliating experience in the 2008 presidential race, he became desperate to recapture his relevance, and that led him to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was his kind of ticket back to relevance. And I think every Giuliani disaster since then has been attributable to that. It was his desperate need to keep Donald Trump in power because Trump was his meal ticket.
Relevance.
Yeah.
Joe?
Andrew, you used to be able to trigger liberals by just calling Rudy America's mayor. And I did it often. I did it often after 9/11, and they hated it. The thing is, though, what Rudy Giuliani did, along with many, many other people, along with police commissioners, the NYPD, and many other people in 93, 94, 95, 96, I must say is something unlike anything I've seen from another public figure. I've talked to people who don't like Giuliani, have never liked Giuliani. Talk about the turnaround of New York City was nothing short of miraculous, and anybody who was in New York in 1991, 1992 would agree to that, which is why for people of a certain age, watching him debase himself constantly, humiliate himself constantly, is so unsettling. I mean, people remember 2001. They remember September 11th and the aftermath, certainly. And you know, some people were saying he was Churchillian then. I never went quite that far. People remember that. But again, turning a city around like New York, again, with the help of many, many people, it was a remarkable political achievement.
It was. And I was covering him as a City Hall reporter back then. And, you know, the previous administration of David Dinkins started with so much promise. He was the first black mayor of New York City, and there's hopes were so high. And it turned out to be kind of a depressing experience. He was kind of trapped by his good intentions while the city was falling apart. I mean, crime was skyrocketing. The streets are in disarray. Giuliani comes along and has this kind of take no prisoners approach, incredibly decisive, mean-spirited, almost sadistic towards his enemies, but enormously effective. And one of the interesting things I learned in the process of researching this book was how much Giuliani created the template for the Trump presidency. And Trump was watching him very closely. And, you know, he was not very politically aware at the time. It was, you know, as a developer. And Giuliani's his bombastic style made an enormous impression upon Trump. And if you speak to Trump's aides even today, they'll tell you that Trump speaks about Rudy Giuliani with a respect and a deference that he reserves for almost no one. And there's a very interesting symbiotic relationship between Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani.
Andrew, would you agree with this assessment? And I've read large portions of your book, that the money stuff, the corruption, the intellectual and moral corruption, I think a lot of people get. But at this stage of his life, is the trajectory downward to such an extent that basically we have Rudy Giuliani, who used to be Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of America. Now he's just a sad, pathetic figure waving his hand saying, please, please, notice me again.
Right. Well, it goes back to kind of his desperation for relevance, right? So 2008, he was the front runner for that race for a year. His race for president, when the race started, 2008, lasted 4 weeks. He ended with one delegate, completely humiliated. And since then, it's been kind of a downward spiral ever since. And in the book, I talk about this huge depression that Giuliani endured after the 2000 race. The drinking started. How Donald Trump took Giuliani under his wing and basically hid him out at Mar-a-Lago for a month and a half as Giuliani kind of convalesced. And, the relationship between Giuliani and Trump solidified just around then. And even to this day, he's kind of like the last, true believer in what Trump was doing in terms of the 2020 race.
All right, the new book is entitled Giuliani, The Rise and Tragic Fall of America's Mayor. Andrew Kurtzman, thank you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on this morning.